Bringing agri-tech innovation is Sense Hub Dairy, the modular end-to-end dairy system, combining animal behaviour monitoring, milk intelligence and automation in one connected platform, backed by MSD Animal Health.
Alrighty, yes, welcome back to the show on a Friday. Yes, it is. Very much looking forward to that. As you just saw in that wee liner there, it is time for our Agri-Tech segment brought to us by our very good friends at Sense Hub. There isn't anything more agri-tech really than rural connectivity, and we know how important that is. There is a summit coming up on the 13th of May, the Connecting Aotearoa Summit. And to discuss that, we have got Craig Young with us. He is the CEO of TUANZ. Craig, g'day, mate. Welcome to the show.
Hi.
Really appreciate your time.
Kia ora. Thank you very much for having me.
Craig, just tell us, what is TUANZ first and foremost? What's the organisation that you represent?
Sure. TUANZ is the Technology Users Association New Zealand. We've been around for 40 years, advocating hard on behalf of users, initially around telecommunications and pushing out the reach of communication services, advocating for the breakup of telecom and for things like the third mobile player, 2 degrees, and also over many years encouraging governments and businesses to work on getting better connectivity for rural New Zealand. I mean, our basic vision is that, everybody gets to access the services they need to survive and thrive. No one misses out, and that's critically important for rural New Zealand.
Yeah, you're right on that, and it is absolutely critical. And we know that a lot of rural New Zealand have actually said over the years that their businesses, the way that they live their lives, education, everything has been hamstrung by the lack of, I suppose, they've generally been connected in most ways, but even until recently, there was still rural New Zealand on dial-up, which is almost seems unbelievable, doesn't it?
It does. And that network that dial-up is running on, but also some of the copper services, is going to be gone by 2028. So we've got to look at, what are the alternative services that we can provide in rural New Zealand that can help rural New Zealanders actually do what they need to do. And we know that there's at least 100,000 people or 100,000 households that are, difficult to reach. And so we have to be thinking about what is the best way forward as New Zealand.
I want to talk about that in a couple of minutes, but first and foremost, I just want to talk about the Connecting Aotearoa Summit on May the 13th. There is quite a strong, I've looked at the schedule for the day, there is quite a strong focus on rural New Zealand. Now, obviously, that is deliberate. What are the issues that causes that to be, so high on your agenda?
I think there's a couple of reasons. One is that we've been always very strong in this area. This Connecting Aotearoa Summit replaces a long-standing event that we've had called the Rural Connectivity Symposium. But we recognised that everything to do with connecting, even in rural, wasn't necessarily just where you lived. It was where you lived and whether you could afford to actually buy the service that was being provided was in your area. Because we know that rural can be more expensive and you don't often get a choice. And so we decided to broaden it out a little bit further to talk about all the options around connecting. But rural is still a very big one of that, because to make sure that everyone's connected, we have to talk about coverage, we have to talk about capacity, we have to talk about resiliency, and we have to talk about equity, and equity both in being able to get the service and being able to afford the service. So that's why this summit has rural as one of the big topics.
Craig, from my point of view, and I know the importance of rural connectivity. I lived for quite a few years in a rural area, and we struggled only to have basic ADSL. We didn't have cell coverage where we were. We weren't far off the beaten track, to be honest. We're on the west coast of the South Island, just out of Hokitika. But it was quite a big problem. And I remember celebrating when I got 8 megabytes a second upload, download speed. That was a big deal. But now most people have got access to a satellite service. Where is the hold up then in rural New Zealand connecting if we've got, say, for example, One New Zealand, or we've got, I think, Sparks moving into it now. We've also got, companies like, obviously, Starlink, ubiquitous. Is it just a price issue?
I think it's two things. The first thing is, yes, it's a price issue. There's a lack of competition in that satellite space. So you mentioned Starlink, and obviously Starlink is the first mover, and they are, here in the market and providing services to people that otherwise may not get a high quality service. But there is a concern that there's no competition in that particular space. And so we're going to be hearing at the Connecting Aotearoa Summit from the Amazon Leo team around their plans for launching a competitive broadband service into New Zealand to take on Starlink, so that we do get some price competition. And we already see Starlink offering lower prices because they know this competition is coming. It's also around the fact that the quality and the speed and the capability of the networks that are in urban New Zealand have always been ahead of rural New Zealand, and we don't want that gap to get any further. And so that's why it's such an important issue, because we don't want we want rural users to be able to do the same things that urban users can do. So it's not just about coverage, it is about capacity and capability. So we want those networks in rural to continue to be growing and continue to be able to catch up to what is being done in urban. I mean, let's face it as well, urban's not going to stop. So the networks in urban New Zealand will not they won't stop investing in them and increasing the capability of those networks. So we've got to invest in the rural networks as well.
So on that then, we're talking about, obviously, as you said, the fact that there was a fibre rollout, right? And I remember when that was happening back, in the late 2015 through to 2020, effectively, that massive fibre rollout, the number was 98%. And the problem was the 2%, or if that's what it was rural New Zealand, right? They missed out on the fibre rollout. With the new products that are coming out on the market, is it then just a bandwidth issue that is the problem for rural New Zealand as opposed to access?
Well, I think, just to correct you there, I think the fibre network was only going out to 85 to 89%. The 95, or the higher number, the 98, was other technologies. So we've already got a mix of technologies in rural New Zealand. The 2% were always the most difficult to reach. So they were going to be beyond the reach of just putting a mobile tower up, for example, because the cost of putting a mobile tower up is not insignificant. And if you're only covering one or two people, then that's not a great investment. So satellite is definitely an answer to some of those things. And so if you can solve the coverage question, and we still have some black holes in different parts of the country where it is still difficult to get to, and the launch by 1NZ and Spark with their satellite to mobile device certainly helps. It will become a bandwidth issue. So it will become an issue on whether the services are in place can cope with the growth in data that rural users use, and the more devices that become connected. So we really do need to, it's not a once and done type approach. And you talked about the fibre rollout. We had a couple of rural broadband initiatives the government funded, but they sort of walked away. They sort of said, well, that's done, washed their hands and said, done it, I've got, I can go and do something else now. But it doesn't work that way in broadband. It keeps developing, our need for it and the way we use it and all those sorts of things keeps growing. And so the amount of capacity and bandwidth we need will not stop. And so that's why we need the rural networks to continue to be invested in so they can keep up.
So who needs to do this investing? Is this a government initiative here to do this investing, or is it a joint venture approach?
I really do, I'm not a big fan of saying the government has to do something, because I think that, there is a market, but in this case, the business cases are always difficult. And so there is a place, I think, for central government investment or continued investment in broadband in rural New Zealand, because if we want our rural users to have the same experience, then there will need to be business cases that are not just based on the ROI, but on the social benefit of having those services out there. It doesn't mean you have to have multi-billion-dollar projects, but it does mean that we need targeted investment, and it means that we need to continue that investment. So it's not just a once and done thing, as I mentioned already, and government is the right place to do that.
Craig, is it a sense, and do you think urban New Zealand fully understands the requirements of rural New Zealand? If you're talking about a farm, they've got sensors, they've got irrigation tech, NATE systems, cloud accounting, security cameras, everything now. Farms are fully connected, and so much of that data is required to basically operate a farm. Is it just a basic lack of understanding into the requirements of rural New Zealand nowadays?
Yeah, no doubt. I have no doubt that urban dwellers, as much as they like to, rural New Zealand, and they think of New Zealand as being a rural country and you drive through it, they don't really understand how technically advanced a lot of our farms are. I mean, you mentioned a lot of things. What about connected tractors and connected devices that, are driving around on your farm as well? So, and that's not going to stop. That's just going to increase in the amount of data that's going to be going through there. And so there will also be compliance issues that rural users get that urban users don't have to face. So there are those things as well. It's not necessarily around urban users not being aware. It's more about we're not educating them and we're not showing them, the things that can be done with technology in rural New Zealand or what's actually being done with it at the moment. So maybe that's a good story to be talking about.
I think so. And just finally before we go, the one thing that I do notice, and I'm fortunate enough, I live in town and I can turn my phone on and I get 5G. That's another kind of black spot, isn't it? You might get 4G, but 5G is really where it's at. We're not getting that in rural New Zealand. Are we going to start to see more of that?
It's a really good point because we've just seen the switch off of the 3G network. So that's made more spectrum available to be utilised for 5G, particularly in rural New Zealand where you need a particular type of radio spectrum to be able to push out the signal further. Certainly that switch down of the 3G will help with 5G. There was the network that provides services in rural New Zealand is a combination of the three mobile providers, but there is also a one provider, the Rural Connectivity Group, which is out there with towers, but you wouldn't know it because when you connect with your phone, it tells you you're connected with your provider, but it's the type of network that we've been able to fund in rural New Zealand. And that's the one that we would like to see upgraded to 5G. So we don't know when that's going to happen. But you're right. In the future, this continued development, we need to continue to move, for want of a better word, up the Gs to make sure that everyone keeps getting those high services or high quality services that they need.
All right, those are those round ones I think you see when you're driving around town, around the countryside. They kind of look, yeah. Anyway, hey Craig, we're out of time, mate. Really do appreciate your time. Thank you so much, and thank you for making rural connectivity a real focus of this conference or this summit you've got happening on May the 13th. Rural New Zealand will thank you. Appreciate it.
No trouble.
All right, Craig Young there, yes, CEO of TUANZ. That is our Agri-Tech segment, brought to us by our very good friends at MSD. We are going to have a quick break now, and then we are going to come back with rural news, brought to us by Farmlands.
Sense Hub Dairy, powered by MSD Animal Health. To learn more about Sense Hub Dairy's modular dairy system that combines animal behaviour monitoring, milk intelligence and automation in one connected platform, visit sensehub.co.nz.